Alrighty, so we've had the brisket on for about 6 hours now. When you decide to wrap could be anywhere between 4 hours, it could be 8 hours. You could maybe cook a whole brisket and not wrap it at all. Either way, you're looking for color and you're looking for how quickly the fat's rendering off and you're not burning it up. You don't want it to get crispy around the edges. You could wrap in paper, you could wrap in foil. Foil is called the Texas crutch. I don't do it, but if you're really in a pinch or if you were trying to cook a brisket maybe 6, 7, 8 hours, you know, real hot and fast, you might want to use foil. If your brisket looks like it's getting really, really dry, you may want to try foil, but I'm sporting paper because this stuff's got plenty of fat left on it and it's cooking along pretty nicely. Also, the time that you decide to wrap is going to have a lot to do with how your fire's burning. If it's dirty, if it's clean, if you've got green wood, if you've got cured wood, it's going to accumulate to whatever color you have about now. Some people may wrap about 4 hours in. A lot of times I won't wrap at all. I could finish off a whole brisket in 12, 13 hours and not wrap it once until it's finished. But this one, for this episode, we're going to wrap it. It's looking just about right. We've got the flat right here. Kind of got a nice mahogany color. A lot of times these things will kind of pull up and it'll collect moisture right there. A lot of the fat will cook down, so you might end up with a light spot right there. If you do, it's okay. Got the flat right there, it's looking good, nice and pliable, not getting crusty. Got a nice bark forming right here. So I think it's about time to wrap this thing. Get my butcher paper situated. So normally what I do, I put my paper like that, kind of wrap it up, cup that around the point, put that paper folded along the whatever the actual angle of the flat is, roll it over once, tighten it up, roll it over a second time, and that way you can always grab it under there without hitting the paper. Wrap it up, put it back on. Maintain at 250 degrees until finished. While we got our brisket cooking, we've got a lot of time on our hands. We're gonna come inside, make a barbecue sauce. There's two types of people in this world. One type thinks you need to have barbecue sauce, while the other side knows without a doubt that you absolutely do not have to have barbecue sauce, nor should you on a piece of barbecue if it's good enough. I'm on that side, but either way, a sauce is kind of nice. So we're gonna make one. We're gonna do a real basic Texas sauce. We're gonna start off with a ½ pound of butter. Unwrap this little guy. We're gonna get it melting first in a stock pot that's already hot. Yeah. I prefer to use a stainless steel pot as opposed to aluminum. It's non-reactive, and there's a lot of acid in the vinegar, the lemons, the ketchup, all that stuff. So stick with a stainless steel pot. While the butter's melting, we're gonna chop up a little onion here. All right, so now we've got our ½ pound of butter melted. I'm gonna throw in half of a yellow onion. Gonna let it cook down until it's nice and translucent. It's gonna start to smell really nice here. That's what onions should look like when they're ready to go. Now I'm gonna plop in a cup and a half of no high fructose corn syrup ketchup. I'm gonna do a ½ cup of apple cider vinegar. This is 2 ounces of lightly packed light brown sugar. A little more than a teaspoon of kosher salt. It's good to me. A little more than a teaspoon of black pepper. A little less than a teaspoon of chili powder. And a little less than a teaspoon of garlic powder. Half a lemon. That's a juicy lemon. Then we're gonna stir that up and use the largest whisk you can find. Let the flavors kind of meld. Really just gonna let it simmer for a wee bit. Let's go check the fire. Boil away, boil away, boil away. So we've been cooking this brisket for a really, really long time. If you've been watching your fire really closely and you haven't fluctuated a whole lot, it's really gonna tell you right now. If your fire was up and down, if it's been dirty, if it's been clean, if you wrapped early, if you wrapped late, it's all gonna come to a head right now. It could mean the difference between a 15-hour cook, it can mean the difference between a 7-hour cook. So it's really up to you and how much attention you're paying to the fire. So we're gonna check this. I'm ready for brisket. Hasn't been wrapped a real long time. I kind of flop it down. Yes, you may wonder, this brisket would be really hot, and it's true, I don't really have any nerve endings in my hands anymore. So it feels really good, it feels pliable, much like the ribs would be, much like any other meat would be. I'm feeling for looseness to see if the meat feels soft and pliable, and it does. So we're gonna unwrap it. Gonna kind of take a look at it. You cooked real hot, maybe the paper might stick to it, and that's okay. Something that you're always kind of looking for brisket is to get it where it's kind of caramely and sticky and the fat really renders down. I guess kind of a meat candy-ish kind of thing. It looks moist. You're gonna kind of feel, it feels really soft. If you wanted, you could poke at it with a toothpick. You can overcook a brisket and you can severely undercook a brisket. So there's a pretty small window of where it gets loose and before it really starts to dry back up. We're kind of at that time right now. Roll it over, looking at it, looks good. We're gonna let it rest for about an hour, or at least until it's cool enough where you can get your hand under there comfortably and it doesn't burn too badly. We'll wrap it up. Just gonna let it hang out for a little bit, and then we're gonna learn how to slice this guy. So our brisket's rested for about an hour. It's ready to cut. I can touch it. It doesn't burn me, delicate little hand. So we're gonna dig into this thing. Like we did when we trimmed it, this is the point, that's the fattier half. This is the flat, it's the lean half, and the decal is that fat band that runs through. So pretty much we're gonna trim up to here, and if you look at it, you can see where the fat and the lean part kind of split off as you jiggle it, and the line is right about there. We're gonna cut this way against the grain. The grain on the flat side, being the flat, goes kind of like that. It could change a little bit, but either way, we're gonna start off like this, and we're gonna fan up, and we're gonna terminate right there. At that point, we're gonna turn this 90 degrees, and then we're gonna start cutting against the grain of the point. And that's the difference between lean and fatty or lean and moist or whatever. A lot of people go through and they'll take the back of the knife and they'll scrape off the fat and they'll just cut this part off and they'll throw it away. That's the best part. I don't know why you'd want to get rid of that. That's the good part. This is where the burn-ins come from right there. That's black gold right there. As usual, I prefer to use a 12-inch slicing knife. It's kind of a bread knife. It's not scalloped, it doesn't have the dimples, but it is serrated. I think this is a great knife. It's flat. We're gonna start cutting this thing. I like to cut it and I kind of hold it, and you never want to scrape off the fat or the bark. We work really, really hard to render fat, and we work really, really hard to keep a good bark, and I don't want to cut it off. It's the best part. And this, when you're cutting these, it's the end cut, but you can always tell that's what a brisket should look like. Should have a smoke ring like that, lots of black pepper, that Central Texas style. That's how we roll. The fat should hopefully be rendered off. It should be kind of sticky and kind of just caramely and a little sugary and kind of sweet. So that's a really good looking slice. It should look moist too. It shouldn't be tough. When you're looking for a brisket, it shouldn't fall under its own weight, but you should be able to pull it delicately. That's called the pull test. If you were judging barbecue at a competition, that's how you would judge it. We'll finish this up. Proper thickness for slices is the thickness of a pencil, about 3/16 to a 1/4 inch for lean. I think little pencil, big pencil. On the fatty slices, I like to go about 3/8 of an inch like a big pencil. And I still use those on a daily basis. If you go to a barbecue restaurant, a lot of times you'll get really paper thin slices. That's a great way to fake out a tough brisket. And sometimes you get really thick slices, and that's a great way to fake out a brisket that's overcooked and too tender. If it can't hold up on a 1/4 inch slice, it ain't right. Ooh, sticky. Cutting against the grain. And sometimes if you get something that's kind of charry, if it is cooked to tenderness, you may have a slight problem getting through it a little bit. One of the big things about a brisket is that it's a severely uneven cut. Some of it's fatty, some of it's lean, some of it's thick, some of it's thin. And the biggest challenge to cooking a brisket properly is to make the equal amount of tenderness all the way through. And that's really, really hard. I think that's probably what most people struggle with. Hopefully, this one turned out right. I think it's pretty close. Feels good. Don't be surprised if one part's a little more tender than another part, maybe. It's one of the things about low and slow. Keeping it all held together so it'll stay moist and won't oxidize on the edge of the slices. This is the fatty half, the point. You're gonna turn it 90 degrees, and I'm gonna cut right down the middle. And this, in my opinion, is the best looking part of any brisket, right there. And that's what it looks like when it's fatty. That's the decal right there. It's rendered pretty well. You're never gonna be able to get completely rid of it just because it's a huge band of fat. And if you got rid of that, you probably burned the rest of it pretty badly. I feel pretty good about that. That's more like a ribeye texture, which is my favorite part. And this is the bottom part of the flat that extends underneath the point. So that's still lean. And if you really wanted some lean brisket, that's where you'd go from it, because that's the leanest part of the whole brisket right there. We're gonna get to slicing this in big pencil style, about 3/8 inch slices. And in a perfect world, if you